The silence that settles over a case like this is never just quiet. It's heavy, unsettling, and impossible to ignore. And in the disappearance of Lily and Jack, that silence has become the driving force behind every question, every search effort, every piece of evidence, and every moment of pressure placed on the adults closest to them. Before we go deeper, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you get first-hand updates on this story and every development as it unfolds. Now, let's walk through the investigation as it has evolved. Through raw emotion, shifting suspicions, expanding search operations, and the complex digital footprint that has shaped the next phase of this case. The stepfather at the center of this storm recalls a moment he was asked head-on whether he killed the two missing children. For most people, even imagining that question is overwhelming. For him, it was a moment that stripped away the last layer of emotional distance. He described sitting across from investigators, heart racing, knowing that every word, every facial movement, every change in breathing mattered. The polygraph test had been scheduled earlier than he expected, and when he finally took it, he understood what it symbolized, the line between being seen as a grieving parent and being seen as a possible suspect. He says he passed that polygraph. According to him, investigators' tone shifted almost immediately afterward. The tension in the room eased. Their words, their posture, even the way they documented his responses seemed less rigid, less charged. He could feel the suspicion that had been pressing in on him start to lift. But the emotional weight of the process didn't disappear. Even after being told he'd passed, the intensity of having his integrity tied to a machine lingered. He has said many times that the hardest part was not the machine itself, but the reality that investigators were even considering he could have harmed children he loved. The emotional peak of that moment, the blunt, direct question about whether he killed Lily and Jack, stays with him. He has described it as a kind of question that reaches into a person and tests not just their truthfulness, but their humanity. And yet, investigators were clear. They had to ask everyone the same hard questions, no matter who they were or how close they were to the children. In that room, emotion and procedure collided. For him, it became a reminder that cases like this are built not on sentiment, but on evidence, timelines, and verifiable facts. But one detail from that interrogation continues to raise eyebrows. As the stepfather recounts it, the polygraph questions were framed as if the children were already deceased, not missing. According to him, there was no phrasing about whether they are hidden, or if he knew their location. Instead, the questions were structured around whether he killed them or knew who did. The shift in language suggested that investigators, at least in that moment, were operating under the assumption that Lily and Jack were no longer alive. This doesn't necessarily mean police had conclusive evidence of that. Investigators often use different forms of psychological pressure, and they adjust their questioning based on the phase of the investigation. Still, for someone sitting on the other side of that table, it can feel like law enforcement has made up its mind. And a moment like that stays with a person long after an interview ends. The way the questions were worded, the way the investigators paused between them, and the way the smallest reactions seemed to matter. He also mentioned that he was not the only individual who underwent polygraph testing. Several others, whose names remain undisclosed, reportedly took the test as well. But unlike the stepfather's own account of passing, the outcomes of the other tests have never been released publicly. Police have not confirmed whether those tests were passed, inconclusive, or failed. That silence creates a gap in public understanding, but it also reflects a common investigative practice. Polygraphs are not legally binding evidence, and many departments avoid discussing their results publicly because misinterpretation can derail both the investigation and community trust. Still, in a case as emotionally charged as this one, the lack of transparency can intensify speculation, especially in a community desperate for answers. Lily and Jack disappeared from their quiet rural yard in Nova Scotia, a place known more for the sound of wind through the trees than anything remotely close to danger. The moment their absence was noticed, search efforts escalated at a speed rarely seen in rural cases. Neighbors poured out of their homes. Strangers showed up with boots, flashlights, and ATVs. Drones were deployed, helicopters scanned tree lines, K-9 units combed the property, and volunteers walked grid pattern for hours. It was cooperative, determined, and fueled by hope, a community insisting that the children had to be somewhere close. But as hours became days, that hope ran into a harsh reality. Ground teams found no clear tracks, no dropped clothing, no disrupted brush, and no continuous trail suggesting two small children had walked away. The drones captured nothing out of place. The dogs detected no reliable scent trail. Volunteers repeated their searches through the same wooded areas with the same empty results. It wasn't just unusual, it was almost unheard of. Two young children rarely disappear without leaving even the smallest trace behind. The absence of evidence began to change the shape of the investigation. That's when investigators pivoted. With ground searches yielding no promising leads, attention moved toward digital and surveillance evidence. Officers began gathering footage from gas stations, rural road cameras, residential security systems, and any location within a reasonable radius of the children's home. It was a heavy effort. Rural areas often lack comprehensive camera coverage. But detectives pressed forward, analyzing hours of video for any vehicle that passed through certain intersections or routes during the window of time when Lily and Jack vanished. That labor finally paid off. Surveillance images revealed several key vehicle movements, unusual, time-specific, and occurring along the same corridor where digital data would later point investigators' attention. The footage didn't provide a full explanation, but it shifted the case away from the woods behind the home and toward the roads leading away from it. The idea that the children may have walked off slowly gave way to a new theory. Someone may have transported them. Digital forensics soon led another dimension onto the developing picture. Device data, once analyzed through warrants, showed pings and timestamps that aligned with the same corridor highlighted in the vehicle footage. Investigators began matching patterns. The timing of the last digital activity inside the home, the movement of specific devices, and the routes visible on the surveillance recordings. None of the recovered digital information has been made public in detail, but sources close to the investigation have indicated that the technological side of the case has become one of the strongest components guiding police decisions. This phase of the investigation required strict legal protocols. Officers obtained warrants to recover phones, laptops, external drives, online accounts, and private camera archives.